Yeah, not really a video I wanted to do right before Christmas. With regards to the tragedy that's just taken place at the Christmas markets in Berlin. I think we need to be very careful what the mainstream media deliver. I saw an absolutely hilarious piece on the front of the Sun yesterday, linking it to some UK ISIS group, which is just absolute bollocks. It's complete and utter horse shit. My genuine belief on this, and this is kind of what makes the whole Islamic State issue so dangerous, is we have a massive immigration problem all across Europe. We have it a problem that you have to remember that we as the West created. You know, you look at the destabilization of the vast majority of countries that surround kind of the Caspian Basin. You know, we've seen Libya, we've seen various places in Africa, we've seen Iraq, we're now seeing Syria, and we're kind of adding to this. Yet there's a huge swathe of the population, particularly in this country, don't want to take responsibility for the refugee crisis that we've helped create. But I think that the important thing to remember is you've got these immigrants all across Europe who are in these refugee camps, which are, you know, I can't even bear to think about what it would be like to live there with my family. You know, I think it's horrendous. And you get marginalised groups who are being consistently singled out. And I think every now and again one of those snap and think, fuck it, I've had enough. I'm not saying that that's the case, but I don't believe that the tragedy in Germany has any direct link to any ISIS cells. I don't believe that. But what I do believe is every time an event like this takes place, very similar to what happened in France for Bastille Day, was the general ideology of the Islamic State is poisoning a lot of young Muslims. I have no doubt about that. There is an awful lot of documented evidence that shows that that is the case. And then when you have these attacks that become global news, it's gold dust to Islamic State, because they can just say, yeah, it was us guys, we planned this one, fuck you motherfuckers. And the way that the global media then pile onto these stories, and it's in newspapers and it's on TV channels, you are feeding this anti-Islamic bullshit on one side, and you're feeding ISIS with great propaganda on the other. And ultimately that's what it is. Do I believe that this, I think he was Lebanese, that this guy had any direct association with Islamic State? I'm not convinced. You know, MI5, MI6, GCHQ, we've got the CIA, FBI, and the various other intelligence and security services across Europe saying, yeah, we've been stopping loads of this shit. Okay. And I believe as well, and I'm not 100% on this, that they knew about this incident, but they were spending too much time fucking analysing data and swapping shit with each other that they just couldn't keep up with it. And I'm a little bit concerned as well that the truck was missing from 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The company that owned it knew that it was missing at 4 o'clock. Regardless of all of this, it's a fucking tragedy right before Christmas, and yet more innocent lives have been lost. But I think there's a collective responsibility to be taken here. You know, let's not forget who created the forerunner to all of this, which was Al-Qaeda. And this is something that the mainstream media don't like getting out there. Al-Qaeda, in a nutshell, and it's a lot more complicated than this, but I'm going to try and keep it at a very, very simple level that everybody can understand. Al-Qaeda, if you directly translate it, basically stands for database. And Al-Qaeda was basically, I mean, to say it was set up by the CIA and American secret intelligence is probably a little bit oversimplifying it. But basically, they were a collection of individuals within the Middle East that the American government funded. They trained them. Basically, you know, Osama bin Laden was a guy that was part of this group, and basically, Al-Qaeda were a collection of jihadists that carried out a huge amount of America's dirty work, and they had done quite happily for many, many years, until they got to a point where even they as a group, in particular Osama bin Laden, was saying back to America, hang on a minute, no, you're taking the piss now, this is going way too far, we don't want any part of it. Lo and behold, Osama bin Laden becomes target number one. Then you have, and to give a good example of what happens when individuals stand up against America's status quo, so to speak. Please, I hate air quotes, but it's kind of important with this one. The Second Gulf War. In 2001, Saddam Hussein took the decision to start trading Iraqi oil only in euros. Literally overnight, that benefited the Iraqi people by, I think, about 18%, which on the oil sales coming out of Iraq was massive. Now you've got to remember, be careful what the mainstream media tell you about Iraq. Iraq was the country that performed the second successful heart transplant. You don't achieve that without having a great deal of academic foundation, healthcare foundation. You know, Iraq was a fantastic country until we went in there and smashed 7 shades of shit out of it. And the reason being, because of oil. It's an oversimplification when people say, oh yeah, well, Iraq was just about oil, weren't it, mate? Well, no, not strictly true. It was about Iraq undermining the petrodollar. As most people know, global currencies are no longer backed by gold. And America worked very, very hard from kind of the late 30s to implement the petrodollar. Undermine the petrodollar, the American economy will collapse. There is no doubting of that. Absolutely no doubt. The American economy will collapse. So, Iraq, Saddam Hussein in particular, went to his government and said, this is the right move. The government agreed. Boom. Iraq are trading their oil in euros. This sets off a slightly awkward situation because OPEC then think, well, actually, that's not a bad idea. And thus is created weapons of mass destruction, which, lo and behold, were never fucking found. So, thus starts the Second Gulf War. Libya is another interesting one. Colonel Gaddafi, again, very similar to Saddam Hussein, your modern Western press paint these guys as tyrants, and that our reasons for going in and destroying these countries was to liberate their people and give them fucking freedom. Has anybody actually looked at Iraq and Libya recently on what the states of these fucking countries are right now? We have destroyed them. Our governments, and I don't remember there being that many people at the London protest for the Iraq War. I didn't see hardly any fucker protest against us bombing Libya, basically murdering Saddam Hussein, Colonel Gaddafi in cold blood. But an interesting point here, Colonel Gaddafi got a lot of the African nations together, and they wanted to create what was called, well, basically an oil blockade for Muslim countries would be one way to describe it, but you know, African and Middle Eastern countries. And his plan was to back this currency based on gold dinars. So gold would be the only form of currency that this oil blockade of African and Islamic countries would trade in. Trade their oil in was just this gold dinar. Because this was a way of protecting the resource and making sure the maximum amount of that resource went back to the countries of origin. It was about actually providing better standards for the people of those countries. There are corrupt governments across Africa, we know this, but there are lots that aren't. Libya being a really good example. If you can get the chance to speak to people who lived in Libya prior to the West destabilisation of the area, they said, it was all fucking problem. The wonderful British bullshit corporation again, another reason why I so virulently object and campaign against the TV licence, actually ran a story that said Colonel Gaddafi had flown aircraft, military aircraft, and had used cannons to fire on protesters. This was a completely bullshit story. Not an ounce of truth in it. Right. Why this is all linked together is there's a bigger agenda here. America assisted in creating an organisation that they exploited, they utilised, and then when they'd served their purpose, set them for the fall guys for 9/11. This then created Islamic State. But they were also kind of smart in certain areas, setting Muslims against Muslims. And I genuinely believe that this anti-Islamic rhetoric that's been forced down our throats for such a long time now, and is propagated at every opportunity, is just going to make these attacks more frequent. Do I believe that this was linked to a UK ISIS cell? No, don't. I think that's an absolute crock of horse shit. But we all have a responsibility. We can all make this world a better place. That's in our hands. We can do that. But part of the thing you've got to do is wake the fuck up and realise that your government is not your friend. They allowed a banking system to virtually bankrupt your country and then expected the poorest people in society to pay the fucking bill. Looters. I'm not saying it was right, but their sum total of jail sentences was something like 1800 years. Yet not a single banker has gone to prison. Why is this linked to the tragedy in Berlin? This is kind of the whole problem. It is all interlinked. We need to stand up and say enough is enough. Stand together, regardless of race, colour, creed, religion, sexual orientation. I don't give a shit if you want to spend your time to 10 pigeons. So long as the pigeons are cool with that, so am I. But the only way we can fix this is by coming together. Being very careful what we believe, being pushed down our throats by the mainstream media, and being very careful with how we bring up our children. We don't want to pass this insidious disease on to another generation. I hope we can all spare a prayer for the lives lost and lives affected by what's happened in Berlin. But what I would ask you to do, don't feed ISIS. Don't feed that propaganda. Don't believe everything that your media and your governments are telling you, because the vast majority of it is bullshit to make you live in fear. This was probably just a guy, some refugee, who just snapped and did something that aligned with somebody else's poisonous ideology. And this is why the ISIS problem has become so dangerous. But remember who created ISIS. The British government created ISIS, the American government created ISIS, NATO created ISIS, the UN created ISIS, the EU helped create ISIS. They've all got blood on their hands. And that's what people need to remember. to end this by wishing anybody that stumbles across this video to take something out of it, but most of all, have a peaceful and safe Merry Christmas.